Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing the Dead Rising franchise on the GeForce GTX 1050 2GB. For performance monitoring, I'll be using CAM, excepting on Dead Rising 4. With the latest version, the overlay is not working on it right now, but I already notified CAM's developers about it. If you want to download the software, there's a link down in the description. So the Dead Rising franchise, I'll be doing Dead Rising 1, 2, 3 and 4. To skip on those particular games, check the timestamps down in the description. I'll be skipping Dead Rising off the record because it uses the same engine as Dead Rising 2, so just expect similar results to the Dead Rising 2 footage. So at first, Dead Rising 1, I'll be doing 4K with the maximum settings, except in motion blur, in order to be over 60 frames per second. So yeah, this game was very old, and this is a straight PC port. There might be a few improvements here and there, but overall it's the same old game as before. That's why the performance is so good. And I have nothing to say about this one, it just runs fantastically well, but when you hit enemies with a blunt object, there's a 3 FPS drop. It's just an effect that the game uses, you cannot really remove it, unfortunately, but I'll talk to you again on Dead Rising 2.
Anyone? Anyone there?
Now I'm testing Dead Rising 2, and once again I'm doing 4K like on Dead Rising 1 with motion blur turned off and the rest of the options just cranked up to the max. And well, this one once again over 60 frames per second, no problems whatsoever. Maybe when there are too many zombies on screen it can drop below 60 frames per second. It can happen on very specific places. So yeah, I don't think it's a big deal to have a drop or two below 60 in places with many zombies. I'm talking into low 50s at the worst. So yeah, once again, not much to say about this one. It runs very well due to the age of this game, and the off-the-record standalone game is running the same as this pretty much. So yeah, I'll talk to you again on Dead Rising 3. Now I'm testing Dead Rising 3, and on this one I'll show you two configurations. First of all 1440p and then 1080p. Unfortunately this game is capped at 30 frames per second. I know there are ways to uncap the frame rate. In my case that didn't work correctly, so I just kept the 30 frames per second cap. And at 1440p, in order to maintain constant 30 frames per second, I had to use pretty much medium settings, including textures, because if I go with high textures it goes over the 2 gigs of VRAM limit. Then when I switch to 1080p I just crank it up to the max, accepting textures once again. But if you manage to uncap the frame rate, you might be able to hit very close to 60 frames per second on 1080p. The game is just not designed for that frame rate, so it's very inconsistent. Plus some things are tied to the frame rate, which is unfortunate. But yeah, overall at 30 frames per second it seems to be quite stable. Mouse and keyboard on this game feels very clunky, but I'll talk to you again again on Dead Rising 4. And finally, Dead Rising 4. On this one, once again, two configurations. First of all, I'll show you 1080p using almost the maximum settings. I lower a couple things like shadows one step below. and textures to medium to not go over the 2 gigs of VRAM limit, and we're over 30 frames per second just fine. Then I switched to 900p, and my objective there is to just try and get as close as possible to 60 frames per second. I had to lower the settings drastically, which means that the game looks significantly worse, but we get a much smoother frame rate if you're into that. If you don't like how the game looks, just drop to 720p and lower the settings into a mix of medium and high, and that should be enough to maintain constant 60 frames per second. But I didn't really enjoy this game at all. I think it's the worst one in the series, at least that's my opinion, very uninspired. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you keep enjoying the video, thanks for watching and see you next time.
What? Oh no!
West, I'm at the hotel entrance. You coming?
I guess. Weren't these people vaccinated?
Yes, they were. Required by law. Nationwide. Doesn't make sense.
Great timing!
West, I'm at the hotel entrance. You coming?
I guess.